Special thanks to Cars of Somerset for, of course, providing the car in this review, and as I've always done, I've linked to their current website stock page, and of course you can find all of their details there as well if you want to check out what they've currently got for sale, or perhaps even commission them to find you a particular vehicle as well. So if you want to check that out, of course, click that link down below. My absolute favourite thing to happen in Beards and Cars is something which has only happened really a handful of times in the series so far, and that is when a vehicle that I drive completely upends my perspective and expectations of how much I thought I was going to like it. And that tends to happen in one of two ways. There are the occasions when I get surprised by something, like an E55 AMG, or of course most notably what I gave my Car of the Year 2020 award, the Jaguar XKR, but then there are some which are even more extreme, where I don't just get surprised by a car, but it actually completely turns me around. And of course, the top of that list so far is the Porsche Panamera, a car which for the longest time I really did not like the look of, but then after driving one, I now want one, and it doesn't change much more than that. And fairly obviously the reason why I'm bringing this up is because this is the first real occasion that this has happened in 2021's season of Beards and Cars, because this is a car which really shocked me, and spoiler alert, this may actually be my Car of the Year to beat at the moment. Previously it was the Maserati Gran Turismo, because I thoroughly enjoyed reviewing that car back in January. It was everything a Maserati should be in my opinion. But now this one, because it just shocked me and impressed me even more than that one did, I think this has got the top spot to beat right now. Now let's talk about the juicy stuff first. Now this is based on the second generation Range Rover Sport, which is crazy to think. You'd think we'd had more than that, but no, there was the first gen, the L320 shape, which then had a facelift, and then there was this one, the L494 from 2013 onwards. Now this one did have a facelift as well in around 2018, but that means that there are actually two distinctly different specs of SVR, and many people might not realise that, and they're pretty different. Now the differences between these two different versions of the SVR, at least from a visual perspective, are very hard to notice. So I'm going to give you a quick guide, thanks to two images dropped off of Google, as to how to quickly notice the difference. And once you know the difference, you will find yourself noticing it. It's actually the headlights. Now there are a couple of other differences, but these are the easiest ones to gauge, because on the older car, those small inner set of headlights, which I've probably dropped a big red arrow to, are a little bit more rounded in their appearance. Now if you compare that to the newer car, the 2018 facelift SVR, you can see that those inner lights are much more close to being rectangles and much more obviously an LED kind of appearance. So if you compare that to the car that I'm in, you can clearly see that this is the older shape car. Now with that being said, the main difference of course is performance. Now the engine in this one is shared with Jaguar. Special Vehicle Operations, or SVO, did a fantastic job with this engine as far as I'm concerned, to the point where, as an XKR owner, this feels like an XKR SUV. And that's a pretty awesome thing to start this conversation with, because that engine, a 5-litre supercharged V8, is shared with the top spec F-types within Jaguar, which is not exactly a slow car, let's put it that way. Now the initial version of this one, the one that I'm driving here in fact, had 550 horsepower and 502 pound-feet of torque, which is 680 newton meters, or a fraction over. Those are very good numbers. Now later on, when you had that 2018 facelift, they increased the power from 550 to 575, and they increased the torque from 502 to 520. So again, very healthy increases, and there was a significant change in performance as well. This earlier car is very rapid. It does 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds and has a top speed of 162 miles an hour. Whereas that facelifted version with more power and more torque does 0 to 60 in 4 seconds dead, which is nuts, and the top speed is increased from 162 to about 176 miles an hour, because apparently it wasn't already quick enough. Now I can only imagine how quick that one must feel, because this feels absolutely fantastic. And honestly, I cannot stress enough just how much I absolutely loved this car, and part of it was because of how surprising it was. Just like the E55 AMG or the Jag XKR, I already expected a certain thing from it. I knew certain boxes would be ticked. I knew it would probably be comfortable and powerful and maybe have a nice rumble to it. It's not that those things were wrong, it's that those expectations were a fraction of what it actually offers. This literally feels, as I said, like a Jag XKR or an F-Type SVR or even something like an XJR, but as a 4x4. And I hate to say it, and of course the comparison isn't strictly fair, but even just on the surface of things, I like this one more, even in terms of just general driving feel, seating position, interior design, etc., than I did the actual Jaguar SUV that I reviewed a while back, the F-Pace. But again, that was the lower model F-Pace compared to this pretty much top of the range Range Rover, so it's not a completely fair comparison, but even in terms of like space and interior design, I like this one more. Now you might be wondering, what kind of price is it going to cost to get something this impressive? Well, if you are interested in buying one, you can actually enter the market for one at about 45 grand. Now 45 grand will get you one like I'm in, which in my opinion is perhaps even the better option, because in terms of value for money, you get more car. Because if you think about it, for that newer vehicle, if you want to go even as recent as like a 2020 used car with 10,000 miles on the clock, so close to brand new, you're going to be paying 90 grand for that. Or at that point, you may as well just buy a brand new one for about 100. This one being 45, well, to me, it's simply a better deal. It's older, it has higher mileage, but the difference in performance, the difference in look, the difference in updates, it just doesn't really justify going into six-figure territory to me compared to what this can already do for 45 to 50, depending on the mileage you want. But of course, that's a personal choice. If you've got the funds, you might just want to go for the, higher class option that's brand new in effect. But for a used deal, which is what I'm more interested in, well, yeah, it's fantastic value. So much car for the money, and one of the absolute best things about it, even just from an academic point of view, is how many different hats this car can wear. It can do so many things so well. Of course, it's tall and it's got all-wheel drive, so it's good in inclement weather in the UK. It's comfortable and it's spacious, and it's got that kind of air of not quite class in the case of this one, but certainly like a stately shape to it, which a Range Rover is known for, so you've got that kind of wow factor in there as well. But it has the performance, and certainly the sound, and the engine even, of an exotic, like a super sports car or a GT. And even the two things which could easily let it down, namely handling and brakes, are both completely up to scratch. In fact, beyond up to scratch. The brakes are phenomenally powerful, which, just like my Touareg V10, you would hope they would be in a car this big and heavy, but also the handling is very good. Now, one of the key advantages this has is it's actually not as heavy as you'd think. You'd easily assume that this would be maybe 2.6, 2.7 tons, up there with your Touareg V10s or Audi Q7 V12s, but it's not. It actually weighs 2.3 tons, 400 kilos less than one of those. That is not an insignificant difference, and it actually helps out in terms of course, having newer engine tech with start-stop technology, etc., but when you combine it with stuff like that lower weight, it actually means that even its economy and efficiency are way better than they easily could be. I mean, if you think about it, this could fall into the same trap that I consider my Maserati Quattroporte to have been in, which is having a luxury car with an exotic engine, and those two things don't always mesh that well because they're for such different purposes. In the case of this one, you've got this hardcore super GT, super sports car kind of engine in this huge heavy box of an SUV, which is traditionally more about being stately and classy and comfortable. those aren't immediately compatible, but they work so well together, and it is a testament to the people at SVO and Range Rover, of course, Jaguar, at doing their job well, because it feels perfect. In fact, it feels like the kind of thing you'd want from like a big Mercedes AMG 4x4. It's over the top, it feels crazy torquey, it's loud, it's raspy. It's like the biggest boy racer around. Now that won't be for everyone. Some people will like a more traditional Range Rover approach, and for those who do, there are a number of options in that regard. The whole point of this one is that it is over the top. It has the louder colours, the flashier body kit, the bigger diffuser with the quad pipes. It is deliberately in your face, to the point where if I personally owned one, I would just embrace that. I'd get it in orange with a black roof and just it fully embrace the wow factor, make it look like a Range Stormer even, because I think it deserves that. It's a suitably crazy SUV. Now, speaking once again to that efficiency that I mentioned earlier on, of course most people who can afford one of these won't care too much about filling up, but as a point of interest, the quoted figures tend to be around 15 to the gallon in the city, which is not surprising, 29 on the highway, which sounds very good, and an average of 22. Of course, in reality, that's going to be different, and from what I could find, you should be expecting more like 18 to 20 average. And that's if you keep it relatively sensible at least half of the time, and then floor it occasionally, or even more than occasionally, and do a decent amount of motorway miles as well. Of course, if you floor it everywhere, always have it in dynamic mode with sport gearbox and drive it around town in start-stop traffic, it's going to drop to single figures quite easily, but most people probably won't be just doing that. In other words, if you live in the centre of London, it might not be the car for you. If you live in the countryside, or pretty much anywhere else in the UK, then yeah, I think you might be shocked by how much you love this car. If you go into it not particularly being a fan, or not really having much in terms of expectations, as I did, you'll be shocked to the point where I adored this experience. If you already like the idea, then it will probably become your favourite car, because it delivers everything you could possibly want from this concept. Now, once again, to return to the more practical side of things, I already mentioned the miles per gallon, but the fuel tank itself is also very large. It's 105 litres. So depending on fuel prices in the UK, you're going to be looking at about 110, 120 pounds or something to fill that tank. Thankfully, it's not diesel, because it would be even more expensive, but that means that the overall range, with 105 litres being 23 UK or imperial gallons, means that in practice, based on that roughly 18 to 20 mpg average, should be between 410 and about 460 miles to the tank, which isn't bad. It's not going to be a cheap tank to fill, as I said, but if you can afford a 45, potentially even up to 100 grand Range Rover, you're probably not too worried about that. The final part of this video, though, is talking about something which you might have concerns about, something which you may need to worry about, and of course, I like to talk about this in a lot of my reviews, especially the rival showdowns, and that is issues. See, the Range Rover is a car which, in sport form in particular, the earlier generation was kind of known for having a number of reliability issues. There was a guy at a place I used to work at where his broke down. I believe it was a turbo issue, and he was told on the spot by the recovery service it was going to be like a $3,000 job. That kind of put me off Range Rovers even more, buying one of that shape at least. But even these, I've heard a number of people say, oh, those SVRs, they can sometimes have issues, they can be very pricey. Well, the fact that it's pricey shouldn't surprise you. It's a 100 grand Range Rover with a super sports car engine. Of course it's going to be pricey, but on the reliability front, I'm not going to necessarily defend the car, because I have heard of people having issues. However, what I will say is, when I Google search something like Range Rover SVR issues, Range Rover SVR reliability, SVR problems, those kind of things, usually when I do research on a particular car, forums, common faults, ongoing issues come up very quickly, because people talk about that kind of stuff. Even in exotic cars like AMGs and Maseratis, the forums are dedicated to talking about that kind of stuff, and it's why forums and owners clubs are so good. In the case of this one, well, that didn't come up. No forums came up at all, and I'm sure you could find them if you looked hard enough, but that was interesting to me, because all of the top results were just pundits. They were just articles written by all of these well-known magazines, which just didn't really seem as authentic to me as an actual group of owners talking about problems that they've had. So again, I'm not saying that they're lying about these issues, and I'm not saying that it doesn't have issues, but I found it very curious that nothing specifically came up. Now, to be on the safe side, of course you should expect it to be fairly expensive, but once again, if you can afford one of these, especially if you're in the position of buying a used one, where you've saved a massive amount of money to begin with on the purchase price, well, chances are you've probably got a little bit extra as a cushion zone where you can fix things if they do go wrong. However, from my experience with Jags, and from owners' experiences that I've heard, people I've spoken to, it doesn't tend to be the engine that has that many issues. If something's going to go wrong, it'll probably be the rest of the car. And the final point that I'm going to button this review with is that this car is shockingly huge inside. Not only in the obvious way of headroom, which of course I'm always a fan of, but in terms of just how high off the ground it feels once you're inside it, the fact that it has endless space. This one wasn't the 7-seater option, it was just the 5, but even so, massive trunk, huge seats, extremely comfortable seats as well. I love that kind of bucket seat again, super sports car kind of look. It was just a lovely place to be, and it feels like you're on lean out the window speaking terms with lorry drivers. It's that high off the ground. In fact, I drove past an Audi Q7 and this dwarfed that car, and the Q7 is known for being oversized, so it shows you just how big the Range Rover feels and is when you're actually in one. It is a gargantuan car, which makes the fact that it can perform, handle, brake and sound as good as it does that much more impressive. Overall then, I was thoroughly impressed with this car, and of course, if you are new to the channel and this is the first Beards and Cars review you've watched, you may want to check out some of my others. You can click the annotation at the top of the screen to see the ones that I mentioned in the video, or you can click the playlist to see every episode right here on screen. But until next time, I'll see you then, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.